Everybody. Welcome. I appreciate your patience as I was working on reestablishing my camera. Welcome to another month of live crystal Q&A. I'm so happy to be doing this every month. I get some great questions asked of me throughout the month, and I think this is a great way for me to be able to help you learn about how to work with gemstones and crystals to support healing. If you're new to my work, I'm Mary Jo Feely. I am the owner of Fourth Dimension Healing in Stillwater, Minnesota, and I'm also the director of the Center for Crystal and Healing Studies, which is my online school. And it's through my school where I offer a variety of courses, some free mini courses, as well as more complex, in-depth, and fee-based courses. And I have courses in energy healing, crystal healing, and I have a Reiki course, as well as a crystal healer certification program. And you can find links about those sites as well as any other information that I talk about today that you might want to learn more about. So today I'm just going to periodically take a check at the chat and see if anybody has questions. So what I do essentially is I collect questions throughout the month, and I like to share those with you. And before I do so, I wanted to share with you an experience I had recently when I was working with a client with a crystal and energy healing session. Now, this particular person really helped me to be able to experience the benefits when we bring complementary and alternative healthcare modalities kind of into our circle of self-care. So essentially, when we think about crystal healing and energy healing, we really are working with qualitative types of measurements. We can't quantify, at least not at this point in our scientific development, we can't quantify results. However, the quality can change. And so what I found really amazing is recently I was working with this person and they had a smart watch, which I'm not particularly familiar with. And this person looked at it just as they were laying down on the table, the healing table, and they noticed that their heart rate was in the high 80s. And then they moved, kind of swiped through a few different metric pages. And then there was a particular reading that was indicating their overall stress level. And it started with, let's say, if you were looking at a round clock face, it was starting maybe down about 7 p.m. would have been essentially very low stress, all the way up to essentially about 5 o'clock on a clock face. And that would be high stress. So when this person looked at that particular metric on their smartphone or their smartwatch, it was all the way up to the red high stress level. And so she was looking at this, and I wasn't really overly engaged in it. I was curious because I've not seen some of those readings on a smartwatch before. And so anyway, we went along with the crystal and energy healing session. And when we were done, they took a look immediately at their watch. And it was interesting that the watch remembers the most recent setting it had been on, and it was on pulse. And I watched the pulse, as this person did too, move all the way from the high 80s all the way down into the 60s, demonstrating that there was relaxation that had taken place and that they were able to reset their nervous system and initiate the relaxation response during their session. That's qualitative observation. And there is some actually quantitative as well, isn't there? Because we were able to kind of watch that actual meter drop. Then they moved through and found the stress notification, and it had been at the high red, and we watched it go all the way down to the very lowest point in what she would call the green zone of being very calm and relaxed and not stressed. And so I found that really incredible. It was a great observation for me to experience seeing visibly with this smartwatch what I've noticed over the years as I work with people and as I work with crystal healing and energy healing with myself as well. So I wanted to share that with you. And I did tell this person that this is something that I was going to be sharing as needed and as it became appropriate. And they were absolutely fine with that. So keep that in mind as we're working with crystal healing, that it really can make a difference. Okay. So I wanted to definitely share that with you. Set that aside. Excuse me. So we've had a number of questions come in, which I often do throughout every month. And as I've said before, if you've seen some of my other videos, replays, is that if I'm not able to get to all of the questions, I will reach out to the person who submitted the question so that they get their questions answered right away. And then I'll revisit that next month. So this is a wonderful question I received. I was wondering if there are stones that you should not wear together. And that really brings up some good thought, because when we're thinking about how to work with crystals for healing, there is an aspect of knowing the qualities of the stone, the properties of the stone, and the kinds of ways that they can support us. There is definitely intention involved to be able to support the healing, because as I've said before, it's not about just picking up a rock, putting it in our pocket, and thinking something is magically going to happen. It just doesn't happen that way. There's an intentional engagement and partnership that we have with the gemstones and crystals that we work with, as well as our own healing intentions. So I would say in one way we could answer this question, are there stones that we should not wear together? If you're feeling overloaded, I would say don't wear a lot of stones. I did bring a couple of different examples of ways that I think we can be mindful of how not to overload ourselves. Sometimes just too much is too much, and less is more when it comes to working with crystals in healing. So one of the things I think about that sometimes can happen with gemstones and crystals is that because we're inviting them to work within our energy field, we may, sometimes I feel like we could almost get a little bit of an overload of some of the properties that they bring to us. And I hope to be able to explain this. And if I'm not clear, I'll keep an eye on the chat, but you can always let me know as well. When I think of two of the elemental properties, the elemental systems of wind and storm, those are the two I can think that can really kind of get a little bit overwhelming. So I want to talk about those in relation to gemstones and crystals, and then you can see how it can begin to kind of support or overload. So the wind element really works up in the head space. It has to do with mental clarity. It has to do with releasing confusion, kind of clearing the cobwebs out. I do have other videos specific for the wind element and working with the wind element, so you may want to take a look at that too. But I do have some stones here to share with you. So let's say you want to work with a piece of lapis lazuli. And here is the lapis. It could be that you want to put it in a little cage and wear it around your neck. It may be that you want to slip it in a pocket. It may be that you want to slip it inside your pillowcase at night. Lapis is very helpful for clearing out that third or that brow chakra, the fifth chakra, or the sixth chakra or the seventh chakra. I was thinking of fifth because it's blue and it can drop a little lower, but really it's much more for these higher chakras. So that can be really helpful. Remember though, it's going to be bringing in that kind of windy, clearing energy, those properties. So if we work with it alone, it's fine. Here's a piece of labradorite, beautiful laborescence. It's an actual quality that this beautiful stone has. It's about clearing out. It's about bringing in some light and lightening the load, especially in the mental field, which is again in the sixth and seventh chakra. Working with this alone might be really effective. Working with it with lapis, you might end up getting a little bit more wind movement than you may be interested in at the time. Here's a piece of fluorite. This is one of my favorite little pieces. This is one I have in my collection, actually. And nice representation that there are a lot of different hues, different minerals included that bring in various colors. And again, it's very, very helpful for clearing wonky energy within our brain space. Here's a piece of sodalite, the same sort of qualities, of properties. And so if we're working or carrying or wearing a collection of wind element stones, that may be too much. So that's an example of not necessarily overdoing it. Now, I'm not wearing any gemstone bracelets, but it may be that you have beaded bracelets. Sometimes you can wear a whole armful and it's not a problem. Sometimes it feels like it's too much. So that would be another example where go with your intuition, go with your sense of this one feels right, this one isn't feeling right. This one, I just get a sense should be removed. And so that's how you're learning to trust your own inner guidance. So wind can be it can help us correct spaciness, and too much of it can cause spaciness, if that makes sense to you. Another grouping of stones that I wanted to bring to you to kind of reinforce that the properties are very important, they're very helpful, and too much is too much. And that is when we think about storm and the storm element. Now, storm is transformational, and we all have parts of our lives that are very much being transformed. And sometimes we find it helpful to have a stone that resonates with storm as part of our healing collection that we're actively working with, because it is helping to support and clear out and bring in this new transformation. So a couple examples, in fact, here's a piece I'm just going to show you here, right here. This is clear quartz, rock crystal, storm element. So maybe you carry this, maybe you wear this, maybe you have a beaded bracelet with lots of pieces of quartz. That's wonderful and fabulous, and that may be enough. Here is another form of quartz. This is Tibetan quartz. It's kind of hard for my camera to always focus, so I don't want to hold it too close because that won't be helpful. So Tibetan quartz, you can see that it's not clear like the clear quartz, and yet it has many of the same properties. It's silicon dioxide, and this is a powerhouse when it comes to working with transformation. So maybe this alone or the clear quartz alone is going to be effective, but not together. Here's a piece of chastolite. I talked about chastolite last week, or rather last month in my last video. So you can find that if you haven't seen it yet. Very transformative. A lot of energies converging together with chastolite. Perhaps a couple of these stones together, but maybe you don't want to wear them all or keep them all on your body at the same time. Here's a piece of red-capped amethyst. Has minerals that are very grounding. It has the amethyst also that's very connecting with these upper chakras. So in some ways, it really works the whole chakra system, which is great. And we have this behind here. You see some of the colors of the chakras, the red for the root, the orange for the sacral chakra, the yellow for the solar plexus. You see a little bit of the green for the heart, and above it would be the blue for the throat, the indigo for the brow, and then the violet, or sometimes white. You'll find it that way too, representing the crown chakra. So this particular piece of red-capped amethyst, fabulous stone for clearing the energy field, getting those chakras really communicating back and forth so that that flow of energy moves from the earth into the heavens and back down to the earth. That's when we feel really balanced. Working with that, with some of these others at the same time, maybe too much. The final one is indigo gabbro that I grabbed. Now, indigo gabbro is a very high frequency stone. It is a wonderful stone to help support the transformation, but maybe this in one pocket, the chastolite in another, this in a cage around your neck, and the Tibetan quartz has been under your pillow might be too much. So I would say less is more, and there's nothing wrong with wearing a number of gemstones or crystals. If you begin to notice that you are a little off center, maybe you're a little bit more spacey, maybe you feel really kind of stuck, that might be an indication to just let actually all of those stones go and give yourself a chance to work with the frequencies that these stones and crystals have brought into your energy field. I have talked about it before. If you're working with a stone and you feel a shift, you don't have to keep that stone within your energy field. In a way, it's done its job. So you don't have to keep engaging with it if you don't want. For example, today I have a piece of sugilite around my neck. Sugilite is a wind element stone. It's very helpful for helping to draw down and open up those higher chakras. And I also intentionally am having small pieces of ruby that I'm wearing. That's the anchoring. So anytime you're working with stones, if you want to have a balance, you can bring in a stone that's going to be supporting that and resonating with the earth element. And I've got some videos about that as well. But earth stones can help balance out any kind of an instability that you may experience. Simply, whether or not you're working with the stones, if you are feeling spacey, if you're over emotional, if you're over snarky and angry and kind of curmudgeony, bring an earth stone or two into your energy field, and that will be very effective. So I hope that answered the question. So I would say don't overdo it. But if you have some beautiful gem bracelets, and I'll try to remember to bring some next month to be able to kind of show you and add on to what I am talking about today, it would be really helpful for you to wear those, and you'll know when it feels like it's a little bit too much, because we are instinctual. We have these instincts, whether we kind of just get the sense or a feeling, trust with that. Okay, so great question. Here is a question that I found really interesting. I'm going to bring the stones over. So this question says, you talk about grounding a lot, and I do. Why is grounding important when working with stones for the upper chakra energy centers? All right, great question. Because when we're working with the various aspects of our energy field, and this question particularly is talking about the chakras, we are going to be working with different aspects of our lived experience. If we're working with these bottom three, the red, the orange, and the yellow, those represent the physical, emotional, and mental aspects of day-to-day life. All right. And so if those are the things you're working with a lot, you're going to be mindful of being keyed into that root, sacral, and solar plexus. And while I'm thinking about it, I have a podcast, the Ask, Learn, Heal podcast. You can get links for all of these below this video. I do have a specific podcast that talks about the energy field and the chakras. So you may want to take a listen to that. You can also access my podcasts actually right here on my YouTube channel. There, just click on the podcast tab. And that's a relatively new feature that YouTube has added. And so you can just look for it there as well. So when it comes to these upper chakras, the throat, the brow, and the crown, and even above the crown, the transpersonal chakra higher up and off, those are chakras that really do draw down spiritual energies, spiritual awareness, spiritual insights. And while they drop down, the goal is to get them all the way down into the lower chakras, ground them into our lived experience so that we can benefit from them. What's coming to my mind right now is a dream. There are often dreams that we have and we don't even remember. Then there are dreams we get bits and pieces of, and if we scribble them down fast enough, we might be able to catch them before they disappear. And then there are dreams that we remember and that we seem to be able to kind of continue to ponder and explore and see what it is about the message within that dream that is relevant for us now. That's the beauty and the reason why we want to work with grounding and stones that can be helpful for grounding when we're working with the upper chakras. So, first of all, I want to talk about a couple stones. Actually, I have three of them that will be helpful for these upper chakras. One of them I've already kind of addressed with the other question, and it's fluorite. Here's another example of fluorite. Very windy. This is a great stone for working with insight and clarity. And if we want to ground that work that we're doing so that we are not just feeling kind of clear when we're doing our meditation or prayer practice or resting with some gemstones or crystals on or around our body, but if we want to be able to work with that in a real conscious way, grounding will be important. There are a couple other stones that I wanted to show you. Here's an example of a storm element stone. This is blue kyanite. Now, blue kyanite is unique in that while it's a storm stone and while it works very much up at that sixth and seventh chakra, it also helps balance all the chakras and clear all the chakras. So again, very much like the red-capped amethyst we were talking about a little bit ago, that this also has the ability to be able to clear and balance the entire chakra column. So does the blue kyanite. Blue kyanite also is very powerful for working with that crown chakra. So if we want to embody the work we're doing, the lessons we're learning, the things we are integrating from those higher spiritual realms down into a conscious level, we need the earth stone. And then another stone I wanted to show you. Here's a piece of selenite. Now, selenite comes in all kinds of different sizes. These are small. This is an example of a small tumbled piece of selenite, and I do like working with the small tumbled pieces. Some of my other live Q&As, we've talked about selenite. I have other videos about selenite. Selenite works at the crown and even higher. So one of the things I like about selenite is it really does work very high up in the energy field, very high in those off-body transpersonal chakras. And it also is really helpful for bones. And so for me, that's a reminder that we've got these spiritual energies and we get to embody all of that right down into our bones, into our structure. We need the earth to do that. And I wanted to show you some of the examples of some earth element stones that can be really helpful. And here also would be, keep in mind, I've already talked about the benefits of having earth stones to help balance out if you're feeling kind of overly watery and emotional or overly fiery and kind of hot and snarky and angry. And just not in a good mood. Those are times when you can bring in the earth stones. So I brought in some to show you. These are stones that I either work with at my healing practice or that I have available through my online shop. So here's a piece of hematite. Hematite is iron ore. It's very heavy, very, very much about being present. If you're finding that you are doing high spiritual work, perhaps with a piece of selenite, grounding that can be very helpful. And it could be that what you want to do is work with both of these at the same time. So I would say I typically, and this would be for you, an experiment. See what you notice when you do it different ways. I like to hold the stone that I am working intentionally with to draw in my left hand. Then I want the stone that is going to be anchoring in my right hand. Switch it up. See what works for you. Sometimes people find if they're left hand dominant, they would do the exact opposite. Just in my experience, this is how I find it works effectively for me. So you would put your selenite, let's say in the left hand, and then the anchoring stone, in this case, it's going to be hematite in your right hand. You're going to hold those, and then you are going to do a meditation or a prayer or a resting time with those stones. It could be that you want to move around your day with these stones. Put this one in a left pocket, this one in a right pocket. Sometimes I don't have pockets. I bet that's the same for you too. I have little pouches. I often will have a little pouch, stick a stone or two in it, and slip it through a belt loop. That also can work. So there are ways that you can be creative with that. So hematite would be one example. Another stone that can be really effective for grounding is smoky quartz. Smoky quartz is one of the 5 quartz families. And when I think of smoky quartz, I think grounding. Okay, so whereas the hematite is super anchoring, this is more of, in my experience, and I get a sense that from this stone, it's more of a gentle reminder. Remember, you're on Earth. Remember, you're on Earth. Remember, you're on Earth. So it's more sustained and gentle, and yet it does ground. So working with a piece of smoky quartz might be something that could be helpful. Here is a piece of jet. Now, jet is fossilized coal, and I always love taking a look, feeling these two, because this is really heavy and this is very, very light. This is profound for supporting the energy field. It is profound for helping to ground and protect and strengthen the energy field. And so when you're working with some of these higher frequency stones, like the blue kyanite that I'm holding here, bringing that down and then encompassing a balancing, grounding, kind of solidifying energy field can be very, very helpful. And working with a piece of jet is an example of that. Sometimes I find that when I want to work with a stone to ground the spiritual energies that are coming in, it's almost as if a shower of spiritual insight and grace is coming down through these higher frequency chakras. It's being supported and assisted with, for example, in this case, I just held up the selenite. And in the process, I want things to be cleared out as those energies are grounded. I may work with a piece of black tourmaline, which is very helpful for kind of taking chaotic energy, kind of getting it back into its rhythm and releasing. So I hope you're noticing that as I'm talking, because of my understanding of working with gemstones and crystals and their properties, their healing properties, I hope you're realizing that I'm filtering some of my choices as to which stone I want to work with the properties that are evident and experienced with these different stones. So I would say, I'm just moving one thing on my computer so I can see my chat. One thing I would say is visit my online shop. Look at the stones that you have and look them up, learn about them. What elements do they resonate with? What are their properties? And then if you want to work with the selenite, and maybe you have smoky quartz and hematite, just hold these in your hand and just get a sense which one feels like you want to work with it. I keep going back, really I do, to you learning to trust your own inner guidance. We can read all about rocks and crystals, and we can read all about chakras, but until we start really doing the work and experiencing and exploring what that's like, it really is actually very superficial. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's like that's where we start. We start at the information, and then we begin to integrate it so that it becomes much more of a knowing. And so we change information into knowledge. And then when we spend time with the knowledge, the way that information is presenting itself to us, then it becomes the wisdom. So there is stepping into a deeper level of being with the stones and crystals and the response that your body and energy field has with them. So I hope that answered that question. So about really helping to anchor the work those upper chakras. This next question, I really liked this one, and so I'm going to share it with you. What are the best gemstones with? Were you a kid or a little bit of a rock hound? Maybe went out into a pile next to the road and started kind of digging around with your fingers and sticks and finding all kinds of sweet treasures that you maybe put in your pocket and brought in the house, and maybe you might still have them. Maybe you found an egg carton, years ago that still has your little collection of rocks. Uh, Kids are fascinated with stones just like we are. And one of the things that I like to think about is that the best stone for a kid is the one that they are playing with or the one that they're drawn to. When children come to my healing office, whether I'm seeing them for energy or crystal healing session, or whether they came with a parent or a sibling, I always have a collection of stones that the kids just get to pick one. And it's always fun to take a look at what they're drawn to. So before I show you some of the ideas that I thought could be really helpful for kids, I wanted to show you a couple things. One of them is this book, and my apologies if it reads backwards to you. I'm seeing it backwards right now, so my hope is that you're reading it in the correct way. But this is one of these old books. I mean, this book was our kids' book way back 30 some years ago. So there are all kinds of wonderful ways that you can find information for kids to learn about books or about rocks. And one of the things I love about this kind of a book, I learn every time I open this book, I learn something new. And this book I've been looking at for a really long time. There is another example of a book that I have for kids, and I have others as well. But this is fun because it's colorful. It's not kind of quite as boring as the way they made kids' books over 30 years ago. This is fun, and it teaches them all about the history and how jewels and gems, oh my gosh, how important they were and how they're found and how they're made. So if you have a child in your life that is super excited about gemstones and crystals, maybe they have a birthday or another celebration coming up, or maybe you just want to treat them to a book on rocks. There are a lot of books that come with rocks that you can introduce your child or another child to the vast experience of working with gemstones and crystals. So when we think about what stones might a kid be interested in, if they're not overly drawn to one, I like to pull a few out. And I wanted to show you why I pull a few out. Here's an example, and this is a piece of the quartz I actually pulled out before. This is really, really cool. And in some ways, it's almost like, it's got this wand effect. And so there are a lot of movies that have to do with crystals. If you've watched any of the Marvel series, they've got the Infinity Stone. They've got all these stones. We've got Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone. So there are stones that kids are attracted to in the stories they read and in the movies they watch. And so sometimes they can make an association with something that you and I might think about as clear quartz. They see something different. So this is always something fun. This is an example of a piece of serpentine. And serpentine is an earth stone. It's a gentle earth stone. And sometimes kids will look at this and go, hey, it kind of looks like a snake. Wow. Well, it does kind of look like a snake. That's why it has some of its name, because the surface can look kind of like the patterns we might find on some snakes. Kids don't realize that it also has this kind of snake-like energy that helps bring earth energy and kind of snake it up through our energy field and through those chakras. So that's a fun way of looking at it. Here's a piece of pyrite, fool's gold. It might be that they're just really attracted to the shininess of it. They don't have to know it's an earth stone. That's very helpful for strengthening their energy field and keeping them feeling well and keeping them settled when sometimes things get a little hard. Here's a piece of carnelian. Lots of beautiful shapes and swirls that can be really captivating. So I have a whole selection of carnelian that kids can grab if they want. Sometimes I'll see a lot of kids that will be drawn to what we may think of as a very basic stone of red jasper. Yet if they're drawn to this kind of a stone, they are drawn to earthing. They're drawn to grounding. And so it's a hint to you, what do they intuitively know is going on in their life that they are drawn to a stone that's going to help them stay settled? Some of the kids in my community have they're in the middle of taking some of these state tests. That's pretty unsettling for a lot of kids. So if you have a child who is one that tends to get a little bit more anxious or a little bit more concerned or a little bit more worked up about some of the things that may happen within their school setting, introduce them to an earth stone. Something perhaps like a red jasper could be great. Here's a little example of Shiva. I think it was last month I might have talked about Shiva Lingam. These are sweet also. So it's just, again, they're drawn to it. Here's a piece of fluorite. You've heard me mention fluorite a few times this evening. And this is an octahedron. Very common to find fluorite in this shape. So those are some examples of what I notice when kids come into my healing practice, what they're drawn to. And I hope that if you have a child in your life that's starting to ask questions about stones and rocks, that you will encourage them. These videos that I make are not designed specifically for children, simply because the language I use is not set up that way. However, there is certainly no reason why you couldn't sit down with some of my videos and listen to it with your child, and then pause it and explain it in a way that might be more understandable. And perhaps I will make some videos more specific for children, but at this point, I haven't done that. So if that's something you think you would find beneficial, please let me know and I will do it. Okay? Here was a good question. This question came in. I'm just debating. I'm going to use this one. This is an important question because you're going to hear about it a lot, and you already do hear about it a lot. It says, can you talk about the different types of quartz? Isn't it all the same thing? Quartz is silicon dioxide. You already heard me say red-capped amethyst. That's a form of quartz. Tibetan quartz, a form of quartz. Here is another piece of amethyst. So we have 5 members of the quartz family. We have amethyst, which is like a purple quartz. We have rose quartz. I believe I talked about that last month or the month before. Rose quartz is a form of quartz. It's a cryptocrystalline. It tends to form much more at microscopic clusters or systems. It's rare to find it in more of a terminated point like this with a clear hexagonal 6-sided structure visible. It's there. It's always there in any of the quartz. It's just going to be at a microscopic level. So it's much more of a collection of microscopic crystalline clusters. And here is clear quartz, also known as rock crystal. We have smoky quartz. I'm going to show you the smoky quartz I showed you before. Here's smoky quartz. And here's smoky quartz. So smoky quartz can be anywhere from almost a pale yellow all the way through almost black, dark brown, black. And so when it comes to purchasing smoky quartz, you're going to want to know for sure, is it smoky quartz or is it citrine? And I'm going to show you citrine. I thought I had citrine with me. Oh, here it is. Here's a piece of citrine. Now, citrine is amethyst when amethyst gets warm, when it gets heated up. Now, this particular kind of citrine is called common or heat-treated citrine because the amethyst, which would have started like this, was heated up after it got outside of the earth. If it's heated up while it's still in the earth, it is called natural citrine, and I have done some videos on that, so you can look for that. So we have citrine, we have clear quartz, rose quartz, amethyst, and then smoky quartz. So those are the quartz family. And all of its silicon dioxide and different other minerals are going to give it various colors. Now, I want to set some of these aside because I want to show you some of the other, what appears to be clear quartz, and it is, and there's a little bit more going on too. So here is a piece of tangerine quartz. I think you can get a sense that got just a little bit of mineral. It could be the I'm not sure if it's manganese in it. I just have to look that up again, but it's not uncommon to have manganese bringing in some of the pinks. So that, it's clear quartz. It's going to have slightly different properties simply because of some of the minerals involved. Here's a piece of double terminated quartz. It means it has a point here and it has a point here. A single termination like this would have grown right out of its base rock. This also has lots of little pockets inside, air pockets. And this is just one of my little prized possessions because there's so much mystery. When you find a stone or a crystal, whether you have it in a drawer you've had since you were a kid or something that you happened across, when you can find a stone that has lots of rainbows or different kinds of characteristics and qualities within it, those can be very helpful, powerful teachers. Here is another piece of Tibetan quartz. Here was the first one I showed you, and here's the other one. Almost always are going to be double terminated. It's just the way they grow. This one has some nicked up, touched kind of pockets. I love those. Again, this is where some of the inner mystery is peeking through, and it's an invitation, almost like a portal to be able to go into that stone. Again, silicon dioxide, and yet because it comes from the Himalayan region of the world, it's going to have a different quality than a piece of clear quartz that comes from Arkansas. Here is a piece of clear quartz, again, silicon dioxide. So it's silicon dioxide. And this is a Lemurian quartz. This is a particular kind of quartz that can be very helpful in bringing forth teachings and messages and learnings that are a little bit more tucked away in our subconscious. Often you'll find these as kind of like a directional wand that can be really helpful for either directing information in or releasing it out. It will tend to have alternating smooth and ridged, smoothed and ridged, smoothed and ridged. And there is some thought that if you just rub your thumb very gently on these ridges while you are meditating, while you are in a state of open awareness, that you are able to touch into some of the deeper information that's held within your energy field. So that's an example. Sometimes you're going to find pieces of quartz that are really, you can see this one has a number of them all growing together. It's got 2 points, and then it's got some of these other additional quartz that have grown on top of it. And sometimes you'll find quartz that actually has partly penetrated another piece of quartz. So it's really fascinating. And so when you're working with quartz, it is all the same thing, and it is all quite unique. Think about us as humans. We're all human beings. We're all quite different. We're all quite unique. And yet we have some underlying properties that are consistent. And so when you're working with stones, and if you've seen my other videos, you've heard me talk about this. If you're going to journal about some of the crystal work you're doing, and you're working with clear quartz, differentiate which piece you are working with, because the response you get from this piece is going to be different than the response in the experience you have with this piece. So I wanted to show you those and help you explore how to appreciate quartz. There's one final piece, and it's very tiny, so I keep it in a little container. And this is known as a Herkimer diamond quartz. And let me see how I want to hold this so you can see it. I think you can hardly see it. It's very hard, a normal Mohs hardness scale, which means the hardness of a stone for quartz is 7, and this is 7.5. It's double terminated, very, very tiny, very clear. This has a very strong and powerful connection with the upper chakras. It is a storm element stone, just like many of the quartz, but not all of the quartz are storm. Clear quartz is storm. Amethyst is wind. Smoky quartz is going to be earth. Rose quartz is water. So when you're working with any of these stones, and Herkimer is one in particular, that packs a wallop often. And so even in my healing practice, it does not, it's not used a lot, but when it is used for a client, I know that they are in the process of really doing some transformational work. And so if you are sensing that that's something that you'd like to work with, check out my website. I do have some Herkimer diamond quartz available. They're sometimes known as Herkies. They are not diamonds. Sometimes you'll see them advertised as Herkimer diamonds, and I always want to make sure we put the word quartz in there because it's not diamonds. Diamonds is a different mineral completely. The other thing that I want to show you this is a piece of quartz with rutile. Now, rutile is, it comes in almost like threads. It's a mineral. And when you find, for example, any other mineral contained within the quartz is going to amplify the other mineral. I have a little statue here that I wanted to show you. This is a little statue of Ganesh, and it's clear quartz. And if you can catch it, I'm not sure, right there, I think you can kind of catch, there's this little piece of rutile right in here. I selected this particular statue because of the rutile in here, because the rutile has properties that are significantly enhanced because it's embedded within a piece of clear quartz. So when you are working with a piece of clear quartz, and it might have some other minerals in there, that's fabulous, because that means you are working with an exponentiated amount of that other substance that's in there. So be mindful of that. Sometimes we do want to have a stone that's fairly clear to work with, and sometimes we want to work with that more cloudy kind of complex part of a stone, because those are the parts of our own life that we're in the process of addressing as well. Okay? Great. So that was quartz. Now, another question I have here, and it actually feeds right in, and I love how these questions feed in because I don't always plan it that way, that's for sure. The question is, a friend gave me a purple crystal. They said it was a cluster. How do I use it? So I've already referenced the word cluster when I was trying to articulate the crystalline structure of the rose quartz. So a cluster, and here is an example that I suspect is what this person was talking about. This is a cluster of purple amethyst. And so a cluster, if you can imagine that actually this at one point may have been very much part of another collection of quartz that was all clustered together. So when working with a cluster, I find it helpful sometimes to hold it in like this during prayer or meditation. It might be that if I'm resting and I want to have some of, let's say, this amethyst supporting me up at the top of my head, I might lay it up by my head. It does not need to be pointing up above your head, but if you wanted to do that, you would have to be very, very careful. I don't worry about the termination pointing up when I'm working with this. Here is an example of clear quartz cluster, right? You can see the matrix. This is the bedrock. That's like my word. And then you see all these pieces of clear quartz that are growing up and out of it. Now, if any of these were to break off, then they would become single terminated clear quartz. So this is an example of a cluster. It's very common to find amethyst or the quartz particularly other than the rose quartz showing up in clusters. Here is a piece of amethyst. An amethyst comes in varying degrees of colors and hues of purple. Some can be very, very pale. This is relatively pale. I have other clusters that are very dark and deep violet. So one of the things I like to do when I'm working with clusters is to be able, this is a great way to help other stones kind of clear and charge. And so, for example, let's say I've been working with labradorite. We pulled that out. That was one of the first stones we talked about. And let's say we've been working with some lapis lazuli, and we're working with some sodalite, and not chrysocolla, chiastolite. This could be a way that we could set those on this stone with the intention that the vibrations of the cluster of amethyst are going to help to clear it. So that's a way to work with it. Sometimes simply having it in your home or in an office, if it's this large, is something that can be really beautiful. And so that's a wonderful way to bring gemstones and crystals into your home and into your life. This particular piece actually typically is at my healing practice, and many of the stones and crystals that I work with during crystal healing, this is one of the places that they rest while they reset themselves. Not all clusters are going to be in the quartz family. Here's an example of celestite. Looks like a blue quartz, but it's not at all. Okay. Very common to find it in these kind of clustered presentations. I had another example of a cluster. This is a cluster of honey calcite. This one's actually available through my online shop. And you can see that the way it grows is out of this very much this formed crystalline structure. And if you're not familiar with calcite, I have other videos about calcite. It will tend to look kind of waxy. This is natural. This is not waxed up. This is just how it looks. And so when we have a cluster, you can see in this one particularly, just looking at it, you can get a sense that you've got these points of and directing these energies, these vibrational qualities of the calcite out into the environment. So that can be great. Working with a small cluster like this as part of a crystal grid, maybe it's the center stone of your crystal grid, and you build your grid from there. That's another way to be able to work with it. So I hope that explains it. There is also a form of quartz that's called druzy. And druzy is actually just very, very tiny formations of clusters. And I have a couple druzys that I wanted to show you. Here is a little piece falling off, druzy quartz. You can see that this is not totally clear. And so sometimes that's just from the minerals. So I would say I would not call this a smoky quartz. It may be, but I would not call that a smoky quartz as much as it is a piece of clear quartz that's not been cleaned up. And certainly sometimes we can get stones that have been very cleaned, and it doesn't hurt the stones, but they are able to gently remove some of the impurities so that there's more of a lustrous, white, clear image. And here's a piece of amethyst that's a druzy. I like this one because it has kind of a heart shape, doesn't it? And another thing I like about this is look at, okay, so that we have druzy, tiny little pieces all over. It's like when I'm looking at this piece, the only part of the matrix I see is a tiny little piece that's not even as wide. It's about a 1/4 inch wide by about not even an inch. But the rest of this is all beautiful crystalline druzy crystal. So that's an example of what a purple crystal is that is a cluster, and some ideas of how you can work with it. If you have the larger pieces, I would say the best way to work with those would be to have those in your environment and use those as focal points to be able to bring the healing properties of those stones into your home or into your work environment or wherever it may be that you are. So we've had some good questions. We've talked about I started with the effect, that really cool experience I had with my client's smartwatch. That was really amazing. We talked about how to navigate working with, or wearing a lot of stones or not, how to tell the difference, how to know that. Talked about why we need to work with grounding stones and work with those upper chakra stones because we want to draw that in. We talked about and helping kids explore how to get excited about rocks and crystals, and it's just really amazing to work with kids about that. And then we talked about quartz, the various ways quartz shows up, and then wrapped it up towards the end here with clusters, including druzy. So that's been a full hour. I hope you have found this helpful and interesting. Please reach out to me if you have questions. I do want to let you know that with my online school, the Center for Crystal and Healing Studies, I am, in gratitude for spring, going to be running a gratitude sale. It's a Spring into Learning sale that runs May 1st through May 15th of 2023. So it's going to be coming up in another week or two, and it's only for 2 weeks, but it's a 20% savings. So if you have been thinking about, are you interested in exploring energy healing or Reiki or crystal healing? Are you ready to dive into a crystal healer advanced work or crystal healer certification? This is really going to be an opportunity that will help you be able to perhaps navigate that within your resources. So take a look at the links below and watch for more information about that. You can reach out to me with questions. You can chat through my website. If I'm online, I may chat right back, so don't be surprised if that happens. You can give me a call or text. I really do want to be able to help you understand how to work with gemstones and crystals to be able to support the body, mind, spirit healing that you're doing. Somebody just chimed in. It's so sweet and pretty. Thank you for all the great info. Oh, so helpful. Well, you are most welcome. I really appreciate that feedback. And again, my focus is to help you heal. If we do our own healing, and we're the only ones that can, then we can be really confident that we are rippling that out into our homes, our communities, into the world, and really benefiting all beings. So until next month, I am going to be having my next live crystal Q&A on Wednesday, May 17th. That's from 6 to 7 p.m. And as usual, if you can't chime in during the live stream, go ahead and just catch the replay. I usually push that out pretty quickly. So for now, I wish you many blessings. Be well.